ever wondered what it's like to request young men to go into a situation where they're going to get hurt? They're going to probably break something. Forwards before a Champions Cup match in a darkened room, a circle of chairs, speaking softer than this, almost where you have to lean in and hear what violence you're going to visit upon these people from La Rochelle that are coming to play in your country, to be sent home, weeping and silenced. And so you have to speak quietly, almost difficult to pick up. Guys like Efan Ruiz leaning in. What is Rito saying for us to do in lineouts? What is Brock Harris exhorting us in scrums? And then quietly standing up, filing out one by one, not a word is spoken, to go and do battle.
As Danny, that was quite an intro. Actually gave me goosebumps as a Blue Bull supporter. It pains me to say that, and that damn jersey on the back wing, is that really necessary?
Sorry. I know it's probably a little bit of kicking a man when he's down. So I think it's important. We talk about this in the pod all the time, to be happy when you're supposed to be happy. Maybe I'm being too happy. But something wonderful happened, as you know. I was invited by John Dobson, to be embedded with the Stormers from a Friday morning, 8 a.m., all the way through to Sunday, 8 a.m. And I mean everything. He said, do not miss a meeting, a taping session, game driver session, right before the game, forward violence session, on the field, in the locker room, people hurting, people crying, people happy, people elated, discussions about life, breakfasts, just, little tiny group discussions about whatever you wanted. How do you find the woman of your dreams? How do you handle a house contractor? What's the best car to buy? Where should we take holidays? What do I do with this family member of mine that's driving me crazy? Just anything, like a team will do. These are brothers in arms. And I got to tell you, MVA, there was so many surprises. Like, I've been in locker rooms my whole life. I've been in rugby locker rooms my whole life. There were things that were distinct and different, and there were points of difference that I think are worth discussing. And we only would have known. The missus and I were all the way in. By the end, I think the players were talking more to her than me. But just interesting, strange events, like Kubas Reinach, explaining life in a French town to her, and just sharing life about family and how you raise kids when you're overseas in a club. A guy like Ben Jason Dixon, who I always thought was a thinking man, just say, how do you think contemporaneously? How do you assign feelings to brain now? Such humility. A CEO driving us to the airport and returning the rental car himself and almost missing a flight. Johan Leroux, just one of those guys who's a servant leader and showing people what to do. Like, this is how we live. I don't care how much of a star you are. Everyone is setting up the chairs. Efan Ruiz setting up the chairs before that forward meeting I described, one by one, counting the 14 for the players and adding for the coaches, and then just sitting down quietly and waiting himself. Things that you don't expect to see. A guy that seems quiet from the outside, comes to the airport solo, gets there early, and isn't someone who's chattering all the time. But in game, inside the game, at Oranges, it's JD Schickling that's putting his hand up, his 6'10" hand up, and saying, guys, that line out that we botched, that I fucked up. That wasn't you. That was me. Taking it on himself. Nietling Fouché going through the card and not doing a first, I don't think it was right, or I did this, I was trying to do this. No, just saying, under pressure, made a bad decision. Sorry, guys. The quietness of that, I'm not even sure that's a word. Quietude, it's something about the culture that is extremely rooted in an idea of humility. And whether that's, like I said, Efan Ruiz gathering chairs and putting them himself and sitting in the silence, pulling the curtain so it's dark, because forwards speak of violence in quiet tones, because you mustn't get too far out on a limb or you will get carded. You have to speak silently and quietly about what you're going to do and how you're going to do it and how you're going to come for your friends, when they're in trouble, saving each other. Brock Harris speaking quietly about Scrum philosophies. I won't get into that because I'm not going to reveal any philosophies or codes, but the idea that you stick with something that you believe in, even when the immediate results are not showing it. Dabo speaking a lot about outcomes being overrated, but instead, push yourself, compete with yourself. So they send us some kids. Well, first of all, the Stormers had guys that were very young too. I mean, Paul de Villiers is only 22 years old. So, you can forget that someone's young if they're playing really well. But on the issue that people were saying, they're sending some juniors. Dabo doubled down and said, then that means you will destroy them. You will dominate them. If it's not Greg Aldrit at 8, but it's someone who's coming in his stead, and you aren't dominant, you don't send him back crying to his mom, then who are you? We're competing with ourselves. This spirit, whether it was echoed by Rito, um, who leads forwards in such quiet, technical, precise tones, a real cerebral coach. Whether it's Norman Laker, who's the opposite, leading defense and shouting to guys to bring doubles into contact and to put people on the floor and then get up on your feet. And almost every sentence spiced with a swear word. It all comes from this culture of I'm connected to you, and how you do reflects on me. And if I drop you, then I've dropped myself. If I've let you down, if I've missed an opportunity in life, then that's the regret I will carry to my grave. This is something they talk about is, and what if? What if the season presents opportunities where you win or you're in competition for 2 cups? What if that's true? Not getting ahead of yourself, but not being complacent and not being afraid to win. So carried throughout from Friday 8 a.m. to Sunday 8 a.m. was not overplaying the hand, not getting too hyped up. The meetings were much quieter than we had expected. In some cases, mumbling, whispering, not this sort of headphones on, rap music, head butting into a locker room, let's eat, let's drink their blood. Not that. Not that. It is obviously it's a violent game. And you must bring that to a ruck clean or you're not going to clean the pilfer. And they didn't bring that to Paul de Villiers, and he was able to latch on like a limpet, like a barnacle. But the idea that you can speak to a young man about what he has to do when it will cause him pain and put him in peril and danger is quieter is better, Whether that comes from the doctor, Dr. Jason, or from the physios, Inga and Kyle, they care for their people. They want them to do well. A leader like Salman Murat, he is that person. He can say, these are things that we shouldn't do in real life, but this is part of this game. So do it well, because if you don't, you're letting your brother down. He's that kind of player. And when you go through the list, whether it's Intutuku Mchunu, who's just a head boy type, who really wants to do the job right, wants to live life right, wants to do the right thing and avoid wickedness and evil, like that kind of guy, really wants to be technical. So it's the same way he wants to bind in the scrum. Whereas you have sort of a funnier, more, Sazi Sandi or Nitling Fouché are just comedians. And so they handle fear in a different way. But the way they come together, Ollie Kebble, who's almost like an by now, he's been around the world, he's been Scottish qualified, and just the connection between these players, it's not obvious. Like, how would Sazi and Ollie and Nitling and Nchunu have met in life? Like, what crossways would have had to have developed for them to be brothers on a road trip? And here they are. And so I think we can talk about how they built that, how they have built it, and what we saw the evidence of in this 3 days. But that was my number one takeaway, was the quietness of humility and the confidence of quiet humility. We're going to take care of this. I'm going to take care of you. I want you to do well. And when I see you falter, I'm going to burn myself into the red zone to save you, knowing there's someone right behind me. If I'm Andre Hugo Fenter, if I'm Fennis, and I know JJ's got my back, I'm going to go to the red zone. If I'm a young guy like Connor Evans, 23 years old, Bishop's boy, just a beach loving, beer drinking young man, like all of us back in those days, he's behind Schickerling and Murat. He has to step up, and the empowerment of that, the heavy waves of carriers behind the Russ, Tinason, Ackerman, you're ready to go, ready to rumble. I just felt like it all came from a culture of quiet, confident humility, a whispered swag, if you will. Um, a very still, a very slight venchat, not too much, just the right amount. Because it wouldn't do to be 8 wins and no losses and be falsely modest. And I don't think anyone was that. Norman Laker was beseeching them to the out of those and yeah, my own censoring, and send them back crying. This is our moment, take it. But just the way they carried bags, they sat down, they helped each other with breakfast, looked out for each other. You dropped a bag here, let me get it for you. All the extras was impeccable, and the way they treated us, just looking out for us, making sure coming onto the bus, we're sitting in the front row on the first day because Dabo hadn't got there yet, and every single player greets my wife first, and then me, introduces themselves. The ones who already knew me, we just kind of hugged it out. But for some, it was the first time, and they were just telling exactly what, no one told them to do this. Just the idea that they would have etiquette, have manners, all of that mixed in with the happiness of a winning camp, but also the looseness of a camp where captain's run was just a jolt. They were just out there playing kids' games, being boys again, rough and tumble in the park, in the forest, in the playground, wherever you were as a kid, making up games that made no sense. Yeah, these are things that we were surprised by.
The big question that arises for me immediately jumps out to me is you've come a long way, a very, very long way to spend 2 days with the Stormers. And the question is why? Why were you invited to do this? What is the thinking behind it?
Yeah, so we have to intuit that because no one's going to come out and say exactly. And I could think of a few angles. Leo, who's a she, chief commercial officer, couldn't have been more gracious in approaching us, giving us this wonderful jersey behind me, but much more than that. It's just setting us up in presidential suite, helping us meet people, but being on the field when we wanted to. Johan, Mr. CEO, taking us into the locker room at the right time and saying exactly when we could use cameras for the victory song and exactly when we shouldn't, helping us with common sense. Tim Cocker from Egg Chasers was in some of these cases, not during the embedded part, but at game time itself, right with us. So I think if you think about it that way, they're building a non-traditional press corps that follows them and knows them from the inside and understands the characters, understands how funny Sazi is, understands that JD Schickling is a leader in the team and one of the first people to speak, but you wouldn't know that from the outside. Understands how dedicated, maniacally obsessive, dedicated, crazy coach, professional as hell, is Norman Laker. But then there's also a side of him that you can see why he's so crazy. There's a thing that we were able to see that the Stormers let us in. First of all, I want to say this: they let me in everything. Like my wife and I were literally sitting at game driver meetings where the final code messages for what they were going to do in each quadrant, scenario painting, what the tendencies of La Rochelle were going to be. We were in those things, just quiet, listening, no cameras. They just trusted us to do whatever we wanted. We didn't use cameras. Why would you do that? You do that to build a story, to have a storyteller like me enlisted to say the truth about what Norman Laker is. Norman Laker had copped a bit of criticism by me. And I think some of it was unfair when I look back on it. Not because I was in there, not because I met Norman Laker. I just think it was unfair. I got carried away. I I jumped from an underperforming portfolio in a team defense to the only recipe for that is it's got to be the head coach's problem. I mean, the coach of defense's problem. It's partly, but it's not fair to always jump there. One reason is you don't know all the things they're doing that have a 1 to 5 year building plan. You don't know what the things are that have a 1 to 3 year, and you don't know what the things are that's supposed to be learned on the first year. Your beloved Bulls are going through some of this in that it's quite easy to say there's one cause for one problem, but a lot of problems have many causes, and some causes, are partly responsible for a problem. So I think the Stormers set up a situation where Norman and I could become friends. Maybe we did. we kind of get each other's vibe. There's this thing they do where they say where you're from, and whether it's a coach or a player, there's two at a time get up and they tell their story, their life story. It just happened to be this time Skara and Tubani and Norman Laker. There is not a funnier public speaker in the world than Norman. Irreverent, deeply incisive, ironic, and incredibly self-aware of who he is and where he comes from and what made him the man he is and what he wants to be, what he thinks he's still turning into. And a coach of metamorphosis for himself can be a powerful leader for players that come from backgrounds where they had to build their own rugby ball to play rugby, where shoes were a luxury, where maybe an affluent background, but their parents were on drugs and fighting. I mean, you don't know who you're getting in a team when you sign a player. Everyone puts on their best face. You and I do when we meet each other. But what's behind the curtain? Norman shows that, eats it up. He's okay with you, and he will accept you exactly as you are, but he wants you to work the fuck out of your body and go to levels that are impossible to explain unless you're in a frenzy, a berserker, ready for war. One of the funny things about Norman Laker is he was a gymnast, a very highly rated gymnast when he was young, with pictures to prove it. Hilarious too. And imagine the body control you have to be a gymnast. And imagine how that can easily be a metaphor for ruck gymnastics and for someone to, be able to disturb a ball. Like when you look at Paul de Villiers, don't you sometimes think he's being gymnastic? And so, give credit to Norman Laker. I think Stormers knew that a guy like me would pick up on those things. Who's late to the airport, who's early, who's a mysteriously undersold leader. What are some of those people talk a lot about Ruiz, like, and they think they know Efan Ruiz, and maybe just having me around a guy like that and watching can make me see things that make me say something different about him. I don't know. That's the first one. The second one, I think the Stormers appreciate this pod and it's consumed and people talk about it. And Norman Laker was upset about some things from this pod and approached me publicly and gave me some shit about it. I took it. Apparently everyone was okay with that because they said, Harry's a big boy. Go say whatever you want to say to him. And I didn't hem and haw stutter, even though I do stutter sometimes. I just said, you're right about this. I think you're a bit wrong on this. And I think you and I could be friends if we want to. And there we were doing that. And the rest of that was the first morning. The rest of the time, all we did was joke. And he explained things to me. I'm here with Norman. He used to hate me because I talk shit about him. Some of it was correct, but most of it was wrong. Is that right?
No, it's right and wrong.
Where do you stand now?
We're a lot better place than 6 months ago.
Enemies, friends,
Friends.
Cool, man. Rito is the same kind of person. So I think the Stormers knew that I would sit down with a guy like Rito and we would talk about lineouts and we talk about mole defense and understand that they're trying to build something very technically brilliant, under budgeted compared to the French teams, nowhere near the sort of roster that Leinster can build, and still win, and still challenge for trophies, possibly get there this season, go to Bilbao or somewhere close. But to do that, they want to have people in the community of rugby, I think, telling a story that's not just fueled by DHL or, obviously fanboy or social media inside, but also deeply invested in the Western Cape and the people of it, not just someone who is potting about the big team in the world right now, and therefore, where is the best team in club level at that place in South Africa, but someone who, was making my way to Newlands on a 50cc Kawasaki, or jumping trains to avoid the conductor like Paul de Villiers does, the referee, or hitchhiking and getting there and hearing the roar of the crowd, playing in curtain raisers, and understanding what the Newlands Ravine means to us, and what the blue and white hoops can give you if they're playing well, and the roar of the crowd when you're about to make a break, which is now, you know, when you see Sasha do that and glide, or Kobus take that quick tap, or Galant pick the ball off his bootlaces, all of this kind of thing can be told better, I think, by someone who wanted to do that, was almost good enough to do that, and maybe looking back, wonders about what could have been. And so there's that. And fact is, Dobbo liked his episode on our show and literally said, come do it. We didn't know up until going to the airport whether he had told anyone else on the team. I mean, it's like Duncan, I finally reached out to Duncan Cruikshank and I said, so we just rock up at the airport. Is there a place to muster? Is a team meeting? Is there a big poll? Do we meet at Schikkerling? Is that what we do? The tallest guy. And he's like, no, you just go to the departures. So I said to Brett, I told her, I think this could be the most elaborate practical joke in the history of rugby. I am just getting fucked for what I said about Norman Laker, and they're gonna have a great time, and we're gonna be standing there and I'll be holding my balls. But no, there we were on row 2 behind Chippy Solomon, and from that point on, whether it was Inga explaining to us how they wrap a player, whether it was Dr. Jason explaining how they diagnose things on site, whether it was Human explaining what you do post-match and Sunday as a coach to get ready for Monday reps and explanations, whether it was Rito coming, at drinks post-match and just say, sit down with me and tell me everything that you learned that you didn't know. I want to know what you learned. I want to know how I sound. I want to know if my delivery of message is on point. Help me, make me better. Or if it was Davi Sneeman, who never talks at all, suddenly going, hey, Harry, I'll get you a beer. Like that level of access is impossible to fathom unless someone gives it to you. So I just want to thank everyone, even a guy like Elliot, who was our driver when we were finally kicked out of the bus. We started out in the front row of the bus because Daba wasn't there. And Chippy said, sit in the front row, which meant that we were in the head coach's row. Then we got relegated to row 2, then to row 3. And then I said to Brett, I think tomorrow we're going to be not on the bus at all to the airport. And sure enough, it was Johan driving us to the airport. Listen, I could not overstate how much access they gave. And every time we thought, now this is clearly not a meeting we should be part of, Bob always said, get in there, do what you want, and no one's going to stop you.
That's so fascinating. The one thing that I know when you and I spoke about this over the weekend that stood out to me is the fact that we actually have far bigger impact than we realize. You and I just sit here talking about rugby a little bit, and people watch us and they take us seriously. And you and I are going to be talking about the Bulls pretty shortly, because I know people are waiting for us to wade in on that. So prepare yourself for a lament on my side. But I've got a plan, and I'll talk to you about that a little bit later. But like you said, that alternative press thing is quite important. I think I'm glad to see that it's being embraced. It's not always universally embraced. It's actually quite universally shunned almost, if I can use that word. But let's go back to the Stormers. This time last year, you said it the other day, 18 months ago, the Bulls and the Stormers would not have wanted to swap. Today they will, gladly. And we were all holding thumbs yesterday for the Bulls at Northampton, and it was just another disaster. I'm not going to use a word that I want to use. And what's the difference between the Bulls and the Stormers at the moment? I know we're talking about the Stormers right now. And the one thing that stands out to me, I had 2 boys at Pretoria Boys High. You mentioned they're walking up, greeting your wife, greeting you. It's something that's ingrained in them getting into that school. Manners, discipline, culture. And the one thing that stands out to me when you talk about this, and it gives me goosebumps saying it, is culture. This typical public school kind of a culture that's now in the Stormers. What's changed? I mean, it's the same coaching staff. It's the same players, effectively. What's changed? Something cataclysmic almost had to have happened.
Well, there is maturation. If you take 1 year in a man's life when he's 21 and then he gets to 22, that's a bigger change than you or I. So I won't discount that. I think sometimes relationships like Gareth Wright, kicking coach, and Sasha Feinberg and Gomazulu, that's going to be a pretty close relationship because they get out there early. They spent more time than any other coach and player right next to each other. They don't have to share any time. It's just you and me. When you miss, you have neuroses develop, the yips, and maybe it's your kicking coach that gets you out of that. Um, Plus, Sasha's so incredibly talented that he can kick 45 different ways. He probably has a different code name for each part of the boot he kicks off. And Gareth Wright's probably, I'm not saying anything out of school here, but he's probably wishing that the most fundamental parts are first, done. So let's just take that and extrapolate that throughout the whole team. Probably it took about a year to get a guy like Paul de Villiers to know which rucks to challenge and which not to lay off. It probably takes about a year to sit down with Ben Jason Dixon and say, you don't have to chase every cause. Even if in the Buckland, you're more of a supporting player, so they want you to chase lost causes. Here, we want you to be on the field for a much longer time, so you need to play a different way. I think also having fun with people and trusting them. You'd say that there's a big group of Bishop's boys. There's Connor Evans, there's Imad Khan, there's Suleiman Hartzenberg, there's Sasha, there's others I'm forgetting. But so the tendency might be to keep the Weinberg boys, Rondebosch boys, and Bishop's boys kind of in one little bubble. And then you would have people from KwaZulu, or you would have people from, Bredasdorp, George, Swellendam, Robertson, beyond the mountains, and they might hang out together. But I didn't see that. I mean, obviously, there's evidence of people having friends, but I think breaking that down was part of the mission, and it might take a good while. Someone said that "Where Are You From" series, when it started, was much more rudimentary. You had a few pictures, embarrassing, of your dad in slacks with a snore, and then you and your worst, 13-year-old self, and then you jump. Now it's a 10-minute, 15-minute thing where you get very naked psychologically. And people said, I want to redo it. Kobus, Reinach, only there for his second match, said, I want to wait a long time before I talk about that stuff. It takes me a while. So imagine if Kobus is right, then maybe it takes a year to be connected enough to want to share that much with about, an abusive childhood. I don't know. I'm not saying that anything happened, but what if that is your truth? Then I don't want to say that on the first time I meet a bunch of guys in a locker room. Let me wait for a year. Let me see what we do in the wars together. Let me see if you accept me. So I think one of the riddle solutions for what you just said is some of the stuff they were betting in was going to take some time with young men, because I don't know about you, but when I was 21, 22, I wouldn't want to walk into a locker room and say, I was never really sure if my dad loved me. I'm not going to start there. I'm first going to say, look how I can punch a hole in the wall, and then we can talk later about my weaknesses. So I think there's that. I think they brought in some very, very senior players as well that have become coaches. So Brock Harris, a year ago, was still playing. Now he's a coach. You have people like Skada kind of on the way out as well. A hybrid. Ruan Nell, he gets up early like an old man. So he's up at breakfast, with coaches and me. He's not like, Imad Khan, who's probably thinking, I would like to sleep till noon. When you're young, you want to sleep forever. So Ruan is immediately, almost automatically, naturally taking on the language and the culture of Coach Deval Duvenaga, saying, like, there's just people like that. They're on the cusp. And so what if that was also one of the mysteries, which is, unlike maybe the Bulls, where you have coaches that maybe are not grooving with some of the young players. Here you have coaches that are just the same age as the players and could conceivably put on a jersey right now and go play. And they know the referees because they just we're refed by Luke Pierce. So if Brock Harris says, I know Luke Pierce really well, I know Carl Dixon really well, then you really have credibility. The other thing is the superstars, the guys like Willemse, Sasha, Corbis now, these superstars, they're very, very humble. I don't know what people have decided they think about Sasha, but it's not true. He couldn't have been set up more for being Vinchat, and he couldn't be doing more, in my opinion, to combat that. So it doesn't matter if Paul de Villiers is the man of the match, or Kubas probably could have been too. The ratio of people lining up to say hello to Sasha and hug him, get a kiss from him, get something signed, pose, hug him, captain's run with no shirt on. He's just mob. He's like a rock star. Okay. And then you have a guy who's going to walk right by him who probably did something better that match, unnoticed. And there he has there's the De Villiers clan right there. That's the only people hugging him. So imagine the tendency, if you're 22, 23, to take that and say, I'm special. I'm really something. I'm not just like all the rest. I'm amazing. I am, half grizzly, half man, half amazing. That you can start doing a brand off of that, and almost your agents telling you in this ear, and these people over here, and these Insta girls are saying that. You could go down that way, but in my opinion, when he's hanging out with Leland Zass or he's having a chat with Suleiman Hartzenberg, they're all the same, and he's dressed the same, does the same, works the same, He gets out there early, so. I think a year is a long time in a young man's life, and he could have learned some lessons at Bachland as well. Where, what is it, Ross? He said he's going to get a snot club one of these days soon, and maybe he wasn't joking. Maybe Rossi gave him one. So, I wonder about the maturation process. I also wonder if Dabo is sort of the clown prince about this. He plays clever. He plays like such a low key, happy guy, literary. He was sick, by the way, this week, and the flu, and he still came full noise. And minutes post match, he's working the laptop. Before the presentations, he's getting things just right. Sunday morning at the airport, he's dug in with coaches on either side, and he's looking at vision of what happened and how did we fold and hold, and why did that, crossing penalty get assigned, and what did JD do, at that moment. And so all those things, he's working, but couldn't be more affable, more approachable. I'm talking hugs all around, smiles all around. It doesn't feel like anyone's allowed to be an arsehole. It doesn't feel like that to me. And I'm going to give you something now, which is a bit weird, which is I was at Captain's Run with the Bulls. And so it's just a captain's run. I'm not extrapolating out from what's behind the scenes when they're going out for beers.
There's no
when
Monster with
just,
Jake still.
Yeah, I'm just saying that there was ice. It was cold. The connectivity between the tendons and ligaments and bones of a team did not seem to be warm. And when I'm telling you that the head of commercial and the CEO and the guy who straps your leg and the person who makes sure you're on the bus, and Elliot who drives you, and Sasha, one of the worldwide stars, and Imad Khan that no one knows yet but could be. There's something going on there. I didn't feel that with the Bulls. I felt in the Bulls it was very much, if I'm senior, don't talk to me. If I'm doing my job over here with lineouts, then you go do your thing with kick return, and let's not be on the same part of the field. Stormers did a lot of all-team drills where they play a modified soccer game, but you can use your hands except the goalie cannot. So it's kind of a reversal, and it's funny. And guys like Zas come alive. He's a big banter man. He's running around going crazy. Wanda Cindy Samalani, same thing. Just he comes alive, and so maybe the spirit of tomfoolery, of horseplay, and yanking a guy's shorts down while he's trying to jump. That it wasn't there at the Bulls. They were very like, I'm a prefect, don't fuck with me. I'm head boy, don't touch me. And there's plenty of head boys in the Stormers team, less than the Sharks actually. But so there's proper rule followers, and they're not all just a bunch of rogues. But there are some really cool cats, like Johnny Roche, one of my favorite players coming up. You know that. Ben Jason Dixon, love that guy. There are different they're different cats. They think philosophically. They got a vibe about them. They're not just rugby heads, you know. And so I think Dobbo's recruited. This is a sorry, it's a long response to your question. I think they're recruited along these lines. A guy like Kubas Reinach's very funny, by the way. Like he looks serious and he has that kind of serious face. Funny as hell, you know.
Mm.
He's just looking for funny videos on his phone before the match. I said, any superstitions? He goes, nah. Then you got something wrong in your head. Then you cross the wrong line on the wrong foot off the bus, and you have a bad game. Like who wants that? Um, right before the game, people were still having fun. Breakfast, game day breakfast. I had about a 2 hour, I mean, over an hour conversation with some guys just grouped around about life. How do you do it? What mistakes did you make? Harry, what's the worst thing you ever did? That kind of stuff. And trading stories. And even a guy that you wouldn't think would be like that, Salman, very humble person to discuss his failings. Not holier than thou. Not, I mean, I know he's pious and he's devout, but he's not sitting there judging other people. He's letting them be where they are at that stage in their life from whatever religious background they come from. So, that's my overall take is that the Bulls need to address more than the head coach. They need to address an underlying culture, which is a little bit too hierarchical, and perhaps get into the idea of a shared responsibility. So, to give you an EG on that, letting some players speak around some pretty serious game driver issues and management issues before a coach does is interesting. We grew up in that way. I don't know if about you, but I had a principal one time that said, Harry, I'm so tired of giving you cuts on your bleeding bum. I want to make you a prefect because maybe that'll be better, put you in responsibility. And now you've got to be the one that assigns who did what wrong. And what I did with that is, okay, if someone's bullying someone and they're not the right size, one's bigger than the other, then you go to the boxing ring in the gym and we tell everyone, and you'll fight me. Or what if you are the same size? Then go to the ring, put gloves on so no one can get hurt, and then you fight. Put your money where your mouth is. I think putting players in charge of discipline and who did something wrong, and can I stop you at the bar before you make a fool of our team? If the players can do that, then you're not putting coaches into now I've got to be the bad guy all the time. I'm the grumpy eating lemons. I can also be a fun coach, and I can stand there and have beers with, Harry and Tim and Keo and Zels. By the way, I did run into Keo and Zels, and it's funny because, sorry guys, I'm sorry Keo and Zels, but literally when I walked up on them, I told Zas, I said, "There's Father Christmas and an elf," and he spit his drink out. So I just wanted to say hi, hey Monk.
I knew that joke, but it's still funny. I've heard it before from you. I mean, anyway, you skipped ahead a little bit. You talked about something at length, but you didn't say what it was. This thing of where are you from? And you and I've spoken about it, but you haven't explained it here yet. And that's quite an important thing. Rassi did something similar with Springbok as well, if I'm not mistaken. What is it? What did it do?
It's pretty common in team building, even in corporate land, I think, to do this now. But in a team where you have guys named, Fouché, Matongo, Mchunu, Ackerman, Murat, it's next level. I don't think you have that so often in corporate world. There's just tends to be people hiring more from their own group demographic sometimes. So it's actually incredibly interesting for us to sit down there and listen to Scott Ntubani explain his journey from barefoot to now, a gray-haired hooker. Yeah, so what it is it's a series of pictures that explain your life and you fill in the blanks. You sit there in front of a team that wants to love you, but they're also going to give you some shit if you say something wrong. So it's almost like giving an oral in exam in school where you have to go up there and make your speech, and not everyone's going to like that. It's going to probably be some people's least favorite activity, and they dread it. But apparently, it's become elaborate, a ritual, and you bring your best, and you study, and you have an essay basically written, ready to go. Or if you're Norman Laker, you just speak from the heart or from your arse. But like most people will probably have a series of notes. Scott sat down and he just went through what he learned, what happened. He didn't make a big fuss about deprivation and poverty, but he explained it, that we had to make our bowl from, the orange wrapping and stuff it, and that was your bowl. I told him probably easy to throw that ball around, not so easy to kick. He goes, exactly. Kind of makes you think your whole life, a ball in hand. Um, yeah, I think that's, to go to Dale College, KES, to have a happy heart. His family was there. We walked outside and we saw a man who looked like he had Scott into Benny's face, and we saw a mother who had his hair. And I just said, "You've got to be the parents." And then they couldn't have been lovelier and telling us, how they viewed it, and they were just waiting, for the players to come out. So it's like a 10, 12 minute, in Norman's case, 15 minute movie of your life with still pictures. This is me. This is my dad. These are the people in life that shaped me. Here's where I got my morality from, or here's what I escaped from. And players cry, some of them. I mean, I watch them. Some of them fall out of the chairs when Norman Laker's speaking because they cannot believe he said what he just said, or showed what he just showed. um, and at the end, it feels warm. Feels warm in the room. Like I'm with people that I like.
When you talk about this, there was a TV series a couple of years ago called Band of Brothers about this
Yeah.
easy company. And it reminds me of that. Guys who haven't known each other from a bar of soap, willing to die for each other almost to a degree. And definitely, and they lifelong, there's a lifelong connection. And talking about lifelong connections, you talked about a 5-year plan and a 3-year plan and this kind of plan. The one thing about rugby is that it's always transient. I mean, I'm thinking about Paul de Vet now, he wonders probably why the hell did I sign up for the Bulls if I could have stayed with the Stormers, that happy little camp there. What I'm getting at is you have a 5-year plan, but your personnel changes. So how does the plan stay alive almost, with different people coming in and going out? I mean, institutional memory is one thing, but I mean, it's got to be in the players themselves. How does that work?
Oh, you just made a great defense of for all coaches on contract renegotiation because it points out how difficult it is. And these are not teams. Stormers are obviously not a poor team. Let's not say that. That's ridiculous. They're well backed, and it's professional. The analysts are top quality. We had the right equipment. We had a beautiful bus to ride in, police escort. That was pretty cool, by the way. And every time we were going in and out, we had, songs of applause and welcome. That was pretty cool. What you just said is there's no way around it. In my analysis, there's less turnover at the Stormers, though, than other places. When I look across the sheet, I see a lot of people, if I just think about it, it's, Bishops, Weinberg, Paul Ruiz, Rondebosch, Bishops, Parl Jim, Boisei, Paul Ruiz, Bishops. I mean, like it's Western Cape, right? Families can actually come and see. There's a lot of pull to stay if you're a Frans Malherbe, Bredasdorp. Even if certainly he must have gotten a million offers over the years. Same thing is true for Ruiz. How many offers must he have got for a team that just needs a hard carrier? And maybe say, hey, Afan, maybe you're not loved in your own town. Maybe you can come here. There's something that brought Ruan Ackerman there, and there's something that keeps Marcel Tennyson for 75 Stormers caps. There's some rootedness. But to your point about the vet going there and Kubas coming in, imagine imagine how happy Corbis is right now
Mm.
to be in the situation he's in. So success breeds success. There's still, I think, a place in the midfield for recruitment. You can still see there might be one more killer wing, pretty stocked on loose forwards, but why wouldn't you want to stay? Is my point. And once you've worked out Sasha's mega contract, then you can slot in the medium contracts, and you can do what Dabo and all coaches will tell you is, I got to make sure that on a traveling squad, the weakest, player 20 to 30 to 28, that's got to be strong. And so when you look at that now, when you look at Samalani, you look at guys that are just under Yuri Matia, you look at people that can perform like Dylan Mart on loan from Griquas. And maybe that's even going to expand to, George and Neisner area. And it goes both ways. So what if Connor Evans is not getting enough game time as a lock for Stormers? Then what if he could go on loan to play at one of those other unions, which might feel like a demotion. But my point is, you could get enough game time into these players using that. So I think people like to be at the Stormers. They don't want to move. They don't want to leave. And you'd have to work really hard to be antisocial at the Stormers.
Mm.
In my opinion, you don't get left out. People don't get left out at the end of a table. People, they put their arms around you and got you in. If my wife didn't have something, someone would go, oh, can I get you this? And then I thought, well, that's just because she's a visitor and because she's one of the two women in the whole situation. But then I saw, no, it wasn't true. The same thing was true for Kyle, the physio. And a player would look out for him. I don't know, players love physios. That's their bartender, psychologist, best man at the wedding. but I mean, let me give a better example of that. A guy like really just coming in, like Paul de Villiers, Imad Khan, these are not household names yet. And a player who's 35 years old, 36 years old, I could see them thinking, I'm above you, but it's not what's happening. So I think all the studies show that people leave a job because they think that their immediate supervisor doesn't care about them. They don't think about the corporation as a whole. The corporation is who they report to. So I couldn't think of a kinder coach, a more modest coach than Rito Kulongwani. And I mean, he has a gear to go to when he's speaking to the players right before, and the ratio of swear words goes way up. But I mean, he's affable, he's approachable, he's a guy you could come to him and say, I've got a problem. I know that my body height's wrong. How can I address it? And then he's not going to make fun of you like coaches. A lot of my coaches when we were kids, he's going to sit down and talk to you about how to get there. Same thing is true for Norman. He just wants people to perform. Now, Norman will show you. He might even tackle you. But, these are coaches if you say, I want to leave my job, I go, no, I don't want to leave Rito. He's making me better. He believes in me. He made me better from year to year. So this is one thing you look at coaches too. Let's not focus on how bad 2024 was. By the way, it wasn't that bad. It was just that it was unbalanced. The attack was so much better than defense. And now the balance is there and they can play different ways. And whoever was box had become better box. And whoever was young has become mature. And whoever is mature has either gone into coaching and they're sort of a hybrid, or they're imparting wisdom. Like Ruan Nell is a coach on the field. I mean, he's the level of communication that he goes into. First of all, he's always talking anyway, but he goes into a focused mode on the field. So he is shouting across the field of where you're supposed to be right now. That's beautiful. No water boy can do it for you. The physio cannot give it to you. You got to have a guy who's played around the world in sevens and knows where you should be. So all those things make me feel like they're not going to get stolen from and poached unless the money is so big that someone just has to take it.
Well, you just described, we just did an anatomy of a happy team. And there's a very unhappy team up here in Pretoria. And it's nowhere it's been more evident than this past weekend. 50 points conceded, 5 points scored by accident almost. against the run of play. Now, you're a rugby fixer. It's in your bio. What on earth are the Bulls going to do? I don't want you to give me the answer just now because you're not going to do an episode on this. But Harry, I'm sitting with my hands in my hair, and I'm not the only one. Is Ackerman going to work out? Is he ever going to be able to change anything? Is he ever going to be able to do what the Stormers have been doing that's taken them 2 to 3 to 5 years? I mean, are they addressing the root issues? Just briefly, before we get into the deeper stuff.
Strange one, isn't it? The Bulls were in the finals, so unless there was wholesale changes in the team, why would they be bad? So that's a syllogism. We're like identifying one fact that must be true, which is there's not that much change in the player core, and you actually got better with Andre Pollard in. I know he didn't play this week, but that's better, obviously, a lot better. Number two, there was a change, which was at head coach position. So our syllogism second point is we must look at the change in the head coach to see why a change happened. It was good or bad. Johan has to accept that. That's part of life. If you don't like that, then be a lumberjack or deliver milk. You are a coach of a team that expects to win and they're paying you money. They were winning, now they're not. You're the change. What's up? Okay, so now he has to do juggling, with knives on a balance beam. No, it's this, no, it's that. And at some point, they all come crashing down and cut off your foot. I think that just happened. That was abysmal. It looked like give up. It looked like people are not happy with each other. No one's listening. Let's say, what do you do? Well, Steve Borthwick was in that situation, and they hung with him. And now England is thought of as number 2 or 3 in the world. So you can go too quickly on a coach change. It's also difficult if you just change coaches, and then you change coach, and then you change coach again. You start to look like a clown show, and who wants to get that job then? Can you go back to Franco now and go, yeah, sorry. That doesn't work, right? Johan just signed mega deal. Like, who are you going? Like, who is it? So before you just say, it must be Coach A, you could also say that, maybe the players, the inmates are running the asylum, whatever they call it. So make Marcel Coetzee the defense coach. He's a good defender. He knows how to coach defense. Brock Harris is doing it in scrums. Maybe you just follow that approach, like the most, senior player, just take on player power, like what the Bucks did when, John Smith and Matfield and those guys, they could run a team. It's not above them or beyond them. Here's my sense. It's going to get worse before it gets better. And getting worse than this is pretty fucking shit. So let's just say maybe my lean is, and even though the cautionary tale of Norman Lakers is weighing upon me right now, they might need to pull off the bandage quicker than wait. Because I wonder if you wait for the thing to play out all the way to the stadium becomes empty. Now, at some point, executives, their job's on the line too. Head of commercials on the line. Like, if you lose the allegiance of lifelong Bulls fans because you're too stubborn or you're delaying, I think that could also be a problem. So you have to weigh both of those things. Do I look like a fool to jump too quickly? Johan Ackerman is obviously a good coach. He's been a good coach for a long time. He has a proven record. Is he up to this? Don't know. Is there a situation that's just beyond his control culturally? Could he sort of stormerize them, and build in the kind of thing we talk about? Yeah, but it will take 2 or 3 years. What if you just say, we should have rebuilt post Jake? And so instead of trying to put cracks and, caulking somewhere, let's just bash down the shower and start over, and maybe that's it. Maybe it's a message, and maybe it's still Johan there in some capacity, but saying, guys, we get it. What we're going to have to do is make serious changes throughout. Some of our players are not listening to coaches. Some of our coaches are not listening to players. And let's just kind of demolish. I would go into the meeting with that mindset, but be open to being convinced otherwise. But I would need to hear a very contrite, extremely open. He needs to sound a lot like J.D. Schickerling did anything Fauché did in the locker room at Oranges in PE. Like, I want to hear that you know you're good, that you got it. I want to hear that you fucked up. And this is why you want to fix it. This is how you're going to fix it. And have me incremental steps, a plan that makes sense, and don't do happy talk. Like, well, it'll turn around because why? Because Ruan Norche can run a line out. We know he can. Because Elrich Lowe is incredible. Absolutely. He was incredible this weekend too, by the way. Elrich Lowe was the best player for the Bulls, which shows me that he's just an unbelievable player. Because if he can play this well in this mess, so there are some lights there, bright lights, but there's something very, very wrong. You said rotten in the state of Denmark. I think that's not overselling it. I think there's something rotten, and we didn't know was that rotten. And also, I'm not saying that means that the firing of Jake was incorrect. Two things can be true at the same time that seem, inconsistent. Maybe part of why it got rotten was a rotten culture, and you're not going to excuse one person from that who's the head coach. But maybe Johan Ackerman doesn't have the acuity to fix the rottenness that developed. Because maybe he just doesn't have that. And I don't think many coaches do. I think most coaches prefer to rebuild, not inherit something and say, make this thing work better when it doesn't want to. Hey, by the way, one way you can know the team is happy is their fixation on the referees is very low. So Luke Pierce and Kyle Dixon were staying in our hotel by a comedy of errors. And so they were right there. Like, you can just walk up to them and say hello. Interestingly enough, Carl Dixon knows us and follows our pod. And
oh, really?
Yeah, he even liked a post I did about him, which is funny because I just think referees are way too involved. But no, hey, Carl, how's it going? I saw something weird happen. I'll tell you, this is an exclusive because no one else was there. Only I could know this. And Carl Dixon denies it. So it's intriguing too. So I was walking down the hallway, which is right by the locker room, and right next to it is the match officials room where they get to blow off steam at Oranges, refuel, probably talk about what went wrong, what went right, and get ready for the second. And the guy who is coaching La Rochelle right now on the surface, because Ronan O'Gara has been expelled or banned for speaking to officials about officials and to officials. He came to the doorway, didn't walk into that room, but he stood on the outside and he spoke to them, and he's not supposed to do that. Big exclusive. I mean, like, whatever. Like, no one get killed, but he's yelling in there about the scrums, about how they're wrong. And a voice came out that sounded very English with a plum in the mouth, that we don't see it that way. And I think that was Carl Dixon. Wait, sorry for my Carl Dixon impression, Carl Dixon, but no one seemed like it was nonplussed, And they did that thing, and then he just went and he walked away, and it was rude, and I thought he shouldn't have done it. So there I am, sort of squealing about that. It's interesting. La Rochelle under pressure, losing. They're fixated on the referees. Did I see one Stormer walk by and even look inside that room? No, didn't give a fig about the refs. Don't give a fig. Let's all stop thinking about the refs so much. They're good people. They work really hard. They're not trying to make mistakes. They're not favoring you or the other one. They're just not. They just make mistakes. Leave them alone, and don't be shouting inside the room. I approached Kyle on the way out to his car and just said, "Did I see something? Was there a guy shouting into the room?" He's like, "No, nothing." And I was like, "Fair play, fair play." That is the way to approach all these things. And Tom Curry should have said the same thing about Bongi. But just leave the stuff on the field and move on.
All right, Harry. I've now endured an hour of your gleeful ebullience, if that's even a word. I'm not sure that my Afrikaans is overtaking me again. But I'm slightly jealous. I mean, not only are you embedded with your favorite team, it's the team that you grew up with, it's part of your identity. And that shirt at the back is mocking me. And at the same time, I'm experiencing the lowest of lows. I never would have seen it coming. So I'll be brutally honest and tell you that I'm not just slightly jealous. I'm extremely jealous. Hopefully the Bulls can put it out. What a privilege, Harry. You were so lucky, man. I actually envy you.
Let me just hug the jersey.
No, come on, man.
Caress
That's
it.
too much.
Okay, so let me say this from the bottom of my heart, with all of my being, and on behalf of my wife, I want to thank Stormers, Western Province Rugby Union, the LaRue family. Also, sorry, Johan. The first time you walked up to me, I just thought, hey, we're just hugging it out, like we're just two dudes. I didn't know it was Johan LaRue. But I want to thank you for that generosity, for the humility, and for the way you opened up your organization to us, and for the open invitation that has also been given to us to continue that, hopefully, as we go to playoffs. I said we, I know, because let's just be honest. I think about it as we. Um, and I think it was much better than I imagined, because I did imagine that this was just some kind of weird wild goose chase, maybe, and that it wouldn't be quite as elaborate, but it really was. We were welcomed into every single crevice of pregame, game day, um, and I couldn't be more grateful. So buy a donkey for everyone, and just the way it was funny. Like, there are just a lot of funny characters on there. We did a lot of chuckling and banter, and I would just appeal to all teams that are in trouble, instead of getting more grim and uptight and convening a circular firing squad, learn the lessons of winning teams, that they're having a lot of fun with each other, and try to inculcate that, and you got something. But again, thanks, Stormers, and thank you, MVF, for putting up with this insufferable up-chucking episode where you're probably throwing up in your mouth.
Just a little bit. No, I'm kidding. No, like I said, I mean, this is so special. And what was in my closing, I also want to thank the Stormers for allowing you back in. Like I said, we never realized the impact we have, and we're starting to slowly come around to it. So we have to count our words, I suppose, a little bit more. Anyway, Harry, thanks for everything. Appreciate it. Have a safe flight back.
This is the Lekker Rugby Pod, only on Megaphone Rugby.